by the Chief Executive Officer of Regional Arts Victoria, Jo Porter. Jo has spent several years in governance roles on several boards, including Geelong's Back to Back Theatre. We are very lucky to have her expertise as part of proceedings today. So thank you, Jo, and welcome. Our first Changemakers event revealed some themes and curiosity from attendees that I think needed, well, I thought needed exploring further after we all got together. So, and it seemed like many of you are looking for, if not a magic bullet, then certainly a key as to how to make your operations easier within each of the organisations that you're currently working for or what you're planning to do. There was an obvious theme of how to avoid burnout of your volunteer base. And so I thought it might be worth exploring how good governance can actually help with this and the other issues that were raised. So as I said before, one of the main objectives of making change is to build a more sustainable creative industry. And in the Changemakers event, you said that, Jo, you said that before sustainability, there needs to be strategy. So that's what we'll probably be talking about mostly today. And this involves taking a step back. And I think you said, your quote was elevating yourself out of the day-to-day, like of, you know, just the operational stuff, and to really reflect on where you're at and where you're going, and to deeply consider a vision for how you want to move forward. So when I set up the themes for Changemakers, what I had in mind was looking at the systems and models of governance and how the choice of these affects growth and opportunity in terms of your operations, and of course the impacts on funding options. That's always an obvious one, but this stepping back and really considering the reasons why you exist speaks to a more holistic and probably more accurate perspective on good governance. So we thought that was worth exploring further. Jo, when we talked this morning, you said when you're explaining governance to your students, it can be split into strategy and compliance. So for today, we'll look at the strategy side of things and expand into compliance next week. So first, Jo, can you provide an overview of both?
Yeah, I guess when we're thinking about governance, we're talking about, and the words are very similar, but it's about government of the organisation. And I think we do get stuck in that sort of side of governance as compliance with all of the regulations and other elements of requirements for our companies. But I think one of the really important things is to think about purpose. And I think that the word strategy can really set people on their heels, because it sounds like it might be too big of a goal or a daunting thing. But so I guess when we're thinking about what governance is, it's articulating what the purpose of the organisation is, and then the compliance part is, submitting a BAS statement. If you're accepting GST, it's paying the taxes, it's paying the rent, it's all of those kinds of things. But to my mind, unless you understand and can really feel comfortable that you can talk about the purpose of what you're doing, then there's no need for the governance that's compliance. There's no need for the compliance yet. You need to really articulate why you do it, and then let that compliance come in behind it to enable what you want to do.
So the strategy really shouldn't be considered as something that's beyond you, or something that's, I guess, unnecessary either. Like, because you could probably engage, you could engage someone like Future Tense, and I see Leith's in here, to develop a big formal strategic plan. But this kind of thinking, like the strategic kind of thinking, can be just as effective on a small scale with, like some key considerations.
Absolutely. Like, I think almost everyone as a child or a teenager, or indeed well into their 50s like me, gets asked what they want to do when they grow up. And I think, that's that's asking what the purpose of you as an individual is. And I guess a visual artist, for example, might be thinking about what form they want to explore, what genre they work in, how they're going to do that, what their network will be, all those sorts of things. And so, and an actor might be thinking about directors they want to work with, the kind of stages they want to work on, the kind of audiences they want to reach, and articulating that as a purpose is really a strategy. But you might not have it all written down and beautifully designed, but you have a paragraph that guides you, and that's your strategy. And I get bothered by the fact that the words strategy and plan get connected, because I see the idea of having that purpose articulated as an ongoing purpose for what you do, and your plan actually responds to the circumstances that you're working in. So, there might be a huge interest rate rises and it's harder to raise money. There might be COVID, there might be a mining boom and there's heaps of mining money. And so your plans are around how you're going to pay for things. Are you going to accept money from mining companies? It's all of that kind of stuff. The planning and so on is going to respond to what your day-to-day circumstances are. But the purpose or strategy is what's guiding you forward and helping you make decisions about what you will and won't do.
And so without that kind of thinking, like, how lost are you then? Like, and what impacts can that have?
I think you're pretty lost, partly because you're like, what am I doing here? And I think we've, as arts workers, we've all had that, what am I doing here late at night? And particularly, I think when you're volunteering or you're on a board and you don't have much engagement in the creative outcomes other than going to meetings or whatever, that you need that purpose. You need to know that your energy is getting in behind resourcing how the organisation's going to reach that. So I think it allows for a sort of purposeful commitment. But I think in terms of the organisation, it can also say, oh no, we don't do that, or we do that, and it will help you prioritise decisions, approach volunteers, get in touch with networks, because you can see who your people are out there.
So you just so maybe rather than thinking of it as a strategic plan or something as formal as that, you're really just putting together a framework from which you work, and I guess a starting point for everyone to go to, at every meeting or at every, for every decision that's made or recommendation that's made for how you're moving forward. You're just referring back to that purpose, if you like. So, and how does that help in other ways? Like, can you elaborate a little bit more on, I guess, how that informs, like, finding funding, finding committee members and volunteers, finding other partnerships?
Yeah, I think it helps you decide what kind of organisation you would like to be, and it informs making decisions around that kind of thing. So if your purpose is to, just by way of example, that you want to do performances in schools, that will inform your maybe who you want on your board, or who you would like to be included as members or friends of the organisation. You might want a couple of people who are really familiar with classroom teaching, or someone who's been in the education department and understands how decisions get made about curriculum and so on. So I think it just, once you have your purpose, it does allow you to also think about, okay, well, what kind of volunteers are we going to need every year for a festival, or what kind of people might be interested in the kind of art that we're going to exhibit in our artist run initiative or our exhibition space. Like, who's going to get passionate and involved in our organisation.
And where you need to go to find those people too.
Yeah, because it's very hard to communicate. Like, actually, communicating to everybody is actually the easiest, but the least transactional. Like if I ring you, Stacie, and go, can you tell me about a craft, an artisan who lives in Surf Coast and makes things out of rope that washes up on the beach. That's really specific, but it's easier to find someone like that than finding everybody, because you can actually go to them and say, hey, I know that you make a basket that I'm going to really like.
Yeah. Then putting you can put those general call outs for committee members, like say, hey, join our committee, but it doesn't mean a lot to a lot of people if they don't either already know you, and there's a lot of advantages in attracting people who you don't already know, because you've probably already exhausted all the people that you do know.
But recruiting in a way that actually gets the word out to say, I'm looking for someone who might, going back to that schools, that might have some experience in the education department, or really has a sort of a profile. And I think that also helps you when your committee members or other people in the organisation get a bit out of line, or that you feel like they're not pulling their weight, that you've actually approached them with, not quite a job description because without getting paid for it, so that there's a bit of looseness, but that you do have your expectations really clear right from the beginning, that you're saying, I'd really like you to come in, I want you to be a treasurer, and this is what being a treasurer means. Or you won't have a title on the committee, but this is what all of the committee members sign up to do. They'll all come and sit in an exhibition, every few months, or whatever the expectations are.
Yeah. So it's so you don't have to do up like a position description as such. You really just have to have, like, I guess, a list of the expectations of what each individual's role is, and probably, like, I guess, like something like a series of, not rules, but a set of
I've got rules on the back-to-back rules. We put together rules, and on the Chambermaid board where I'm the chair, which is, it's a tiny company, but we actually do have position descriptions for board members, and we have terms of reference for behaviour in our meetings, and they're pretty basic, like not bullying anyone, not interrupting unduly, and being respectful, but they're also have the conflicts of interest and what people's roles are and so on, so that that people are accountable, but also that you're doing them the favour of being really clear about what they're getting into right from the beginning.
Yeah. So if you can say to people, oh, well, we're running a gallery space and our plan is to have at least 8 exhibitions this year. So if you're coming on in the role of, say, someone who's going to help out with comms, then you know that every few weeks you'll be having to do some fairly in-depth work as part of the comms with that. So you're clear on that from the very beginning. Like, I know from personal experience, I've gone on to a couple of committees and said, oh, okay, and they've said, oh, well, you've worked in comms before, you can help us with the comms, but it's never actually been articulated what that might look like. Like, do you have a website? Do you have socials? Are you planning on setting those up? Or, is it really just, communicating with your existing audience? Or
and it does help. It helps, like, if there's more people involved in the organisation than are on the committee of management or the board or whatever, for this purpose, they're the same thing. It helps communicate back to them what their reasonable expectations of those volunteers on the board are.
So apart from, I guess, explaining what you're all about and potentially recruiting new and valuable members to your committee, building that vision for how you're going to go about things, or your strategy, also helps show your value to, like, others. Like,
I think so. That when you're thinking about what we're calling a strategy or purpose, you're thinking about what resources you might want or need in order to deliver that purpose, and that might just be really general, like you need a network of people who want to come to see things. You might identify what kind of events or the number of events, or just that sort of just sort of really thinking through what your thoughts are that articulates what your value is. And I think that also helps you, for example, if you're looking for new supporters, to be able to talk to them about what your needs are, but also excite them about what you do. Because, once you start reading about it, you look at the values of, oh, these people believe in this, that, and the other, and they get out and support, kids in the schools or local artists' livelihoods by selling their work. You might get a mentorship. I'm just asking, responding to Virginia, I think, yes, there are mentorship programs, but also informally, certainly approaching Rav and, me or one of the other staff members are really happy to have, a regular meeting with you. Virginia, are you based in Apollo Bay?
No, she's in Torquay.
In Torquay. Okay, so so just being able to, I think, look around and go, oh, who's doing stuff that I think is really good, and finding that mentor. And you might not find the right one straight away. It's a bit like a doctor. You kind of need to find the person that you're going to be able to kind of go on a bit of a journey with, but also take them challenges, not expect them to do the work. And I think that that's also, sometimes finding the right mentor is difficult because they want to just help you and fix it and make suggestions, but actually the best ones are the ones that are saying, well, here's what I'm seeing, how do you think we should fix it? And then you go away and figure it out for yourself. But having that sort of discipline around that could really support your thinking in this kind of area, just to flesh it out. And I wouldn't go more than a page. Like, if it's so to get into pages and pages with a small organisation, you're over-egging it. And one of the things that I really like to stress and try to put into practice when I'm chairing meetings is to spend 70 or 80% of the meeting of a full committee talking about how the strategy is being impacted, how are we delivering on that, what are the awesome things that we're doing that are actually moving the organisation forward, and leave the compliance to a reporting format so that if there's a profit and loss, if you've got any money, then you're presenting a financial statement and you're confirming that all of the obligations have been met, but you don't spend a long time in the meeting in the doing. And if your whole organisation is volunteers, it might be worth being really structured around saying, okay, we're going to spend 40 minutes on our strategy, what we're planning, what we're thinking, and then break out into smaller committees for half an hour that actually do the nuts and bolts, and then come back to the whole group to report in what's happened, so that you don't get the same people having to do the detail all the time, but also that you don't get that sort of fatigue of quite often it's the treasurer who's like totally fixated on getting understanding the balance sheet down to the last 10 cents, and that
we all love treasurers.
Yeah, we know that's really important, but I think that we often find that compliance stuff is within our comfort zone. There's an answer, we can be correct on that kind of stuff. It's like you check things off your list. But that the understanding the strategy and where you're going and how what you're doing is fulfilling that strategy is the fun stuff, but it's also the stuff that can be quite demanding because it requires collaboration and a lot of trust among the people in the room.
Yeah, and again, if you've got that, I guess, strategic base from which you're working, that framework, then you can always keep going back to that in all of those discussions. And that should be the fun part, because you're planning what you're wanting to do, you're planning how to fulfill that vision. So, your committee meetings can, like you were saying, should be 80% focused on that, on what you're trying to do, not necessarily the nuts and bolts of
looking backwards.
How.
Yeah.
So there are lots of different ways of, I guess, approaching the more, well, not more boring, but the necessary things, and probably those compliance related things. Just getting back to that mentorship though, and I think peer-to-peer mentorship is actually really valuable, and I think that's where the network that we're trying to set up will actually really come into play, like particularly if you're talking about building an organisation that's very much like a lot of others that exist across the region, and you're all pretty much at the same stages. And there may be some who have a couple more years experience that can, I guess, lead by not only example, but like the mistakes that they've made or things that they've found that didn't work for them. So I really think that this network that we're really encouraging people to get involved with will certainly help with that, I guess, mentorship, because mentorship at the end of the day is learning by doing, and and from people who are more experienced than you. But in the absence of trying to of being able to find those, then I think looking to other organisations that are very much like your own is a great place to start. So Joe, like I wanted to talk about refer back to a case study, like so we can like just go through the steps of what you might be considering. And I know a lot of people who are in this chat are already at a point where they've gone past this point. They've already established the organisation, but it may still help in terms of offering that real reflection on where you are now by I guess starting from the start. So so the scenario is I'm an artist in a regional community. I have a couple of creative friends who want to expand their network and perhaps look at finding a space, maybe running workshops, and but most importantly, establishing a group of like-minded people who get together regularly. And like there may or may not be a space involved as yet, but you'd be looking to do that, to house your workshops. So, and everyone's thinking, well, we probably need some money to start us up, so maybe we should go apply for a grant. So what should be done next? Because I know a lot of the times the leap is to let's go apply for a grant. So where would you start? I would start with looking what else exists in the community already, and seeing if you can partner up first.
Yeah, I agree. I think that in strategy world, that's called a situation analysis. And someone earlier today, after I'd spent hours putting a document together, said, "I think you need a heat map." I was like, "Okay." Just understanding who's who in the zoo, in terms of what's happening in the town or the district or the neighbourhood or whatever context you're working in, and looking at what they're doing, asking them. People are very generous with their time. I mean, I think there'll be a bit of competition in terms of letting go of numbers, but if you can find out what their earnings are, or just really think carefully about what their business model is, and then and then as your ideas unfold, go back to your purpose and ask that sort of who, what, why, when, how questions about how will we differentiate, in what way will we be different to what's already on offer. And if it's not that different, maybe it's worth approaching them, as you say, for collaboration. And that might not be that you and your three friends work with them all the time, but it might be saying, like, maybe in an artist run initiative kind of context, asking if you and your friends could curate a show in their space a couple of times and see what kind of work sells and all of those kinds of things. So I think in terms of that sort of mapping exercise, I think that's really important.
And a lot of these, like if it's an organisation that's been around for a long time, they may be looking at changing up themselves. Like there may be, like they may be, either, well, they could be a little bit tired, or they could be like, well, they might have numbers dropping off, or or they've lost a couple of committee members recently. So they may, be actually looking for new opportunities. So approaching that conversation more as, what do you need, rather than what can you do for us, is like a better way, I guess, to start that conversation, rather than coming in and saying.
It's definitely one way. And sometimes people are a bit like, oh, I don't want to talk to you, I don't play well, I don't play well with others, and that's totally fine. You just just move on, but it is worth checking that. And then I think as we've been talking about keep circling back to your purpose or your strategy in terms of, well, we want to do this because blah, blah, blah. And if the other people that you're mapping are not doing that, that's potentially an indication that what you want to do will be useful or interesting and all of those sorts of things. But then I think it's also worth telling people what you're planning to do and just gauging their level of enthusiasm, because there's nothing stopping you doing it on your own or with your friends, and it stays within the three of you. But if you're thinking about, we all think about magnificent things coming out of our small initiatives, and so if you're thinking you will want magnificent and outcomes and sort of widespread engagement, talking about it and developing the way that you talk about it, just to kind of gauge that level of enthusiasm, will also help flush out resources like grants. That if you're talking, we're at the event in Bannockburn the other day, someone who runs concerts was talking with Kim Kim Biggs from Surf Coast, and she's like, oh wow, that's really interesting. And you're like, oh, okay, this person has figured out how to talk about their work with a very empathetic public servant. That's really fantastic. But that sort of also indicates that it's got a purpose within that kind of world. But don't let it stop you if it doesn't have appeal to local government. Like, things don't appeal to local government and they don't have much money. So I guess the big thing for me is not to build a project that is going to have to be funding reliant, and that your strategy or your purpose is actually informing something that's exciting to you, whether or not you get a grant. I think that's, you can't rely on government to validate your good idea. Sometimes you're going to have to just get on with it, and they'll come later. So I think that work around understanding where you're working, what else is going on, and then maybe the next thing is really who can you bring on board, like who are your friends and relations and neighbours and other school parents, or on the footy team or whatever it is, that might not be artists, and they might not be that interested in, generally speaking, the arts as you, but they're your friends. And so being able to say, hey, accountant, can you come and help me out with the budget, or just identifying what resources you think you're going to need as you go along in your journey. And I think you can it's very hard once you've started to take your feet off the pedals and have that pause moment. But certainly for those of you who are already in organisations, just taking one committee meeting to go, hang on, are we still doing what we set out to do? What kind of resources are we missing? Like, some of that kind of stuff can be a real investment in what you do next.
There was a really good example locally here. I was talking just late last year with a group of women who had a really great idea for a festival, and because they'd just come back from one that was very similar up north, and they wanted to build something very like that down here. And they were like, it's this 3-day festival, it'll be great. We'll get this speaker and that speaker. We'll have bands and we'll have an exhibition. And as I was talking to them, like, the enthusiasm was fantastic. And I said, well, where's the money coming from? And have you done a budget? And have you looked at, who you have to involve, where you're going to have it, all of these things? Maybe you might want to reconsider just having something that's just a little bit smaller to start off with. It's not to say that you shouldn't lose vision of having that wonderful 3-day festival further down the track. And this is, I guess, the importance of saying, okay, well, where do we want to be in 6 months, 1 year, 5 years time? Because they're all going to look very different, and you're going to have to be very flexible at each stage of how you're going to move and shape, because there's a lot of outside forces that will change that. But I guess having like the ideal of where you're going to be in 6 months time when you have this first event, how can you do it that you still have the essence of that, but you're not necessarily burning yourself out at the first event, running yourself into the ground and stressing yourself about getting enough money to pull it together and all of that. So just run something small, and then as you're going, like, gauge the interest from the people that you engaged, really, make sure that you keep track of the people who come along, who come and visit, who are engaging with the services or whatever you are offering. And really document that all really well. So then you've got something to go forward with. You've got evidence of the value of what you're bringing, to the community, and that backs up what you thought existed. Plus, you're probably getting a lot of insight as you go too, as to how you can grow and what will be involved in growing. So, I think that, and that's how they've gone with it. They've changed it from 3 to 1. And, while it has been like a really hard slog for like a small group of friends who've pulled it together, but they're still enjoying it. Like, I can tell that they're still enjoying the process. Like, they're not going, oh my God, what have we done? And they're already looking to like how they might be able to build on it next year. Like, just learn as you go and don't feel like you've got to do everything all at once. Like, and even if you have like done that strategy and you go, okay, this is what we'd really like to do. And there's another space that I can think of who's worked really hard over the years to get their own space, and now they have it. I think it's really valuable to like now go, okay, we've got the space. We have time to take a breath now and sit back and look at what we have. We're pretty sustainable as we go with what we're offering. We don't have to be all things to all people. Like, we know what the community wants from us, but you need to work within the boundaries of what you can do and what you're able to deliver as well. Like, even if you, and that was something we were going to talk about too, actually going to your perceived audience and seeing what they do actually want, what you think they might want, and what they actually want, maybe two completely different things.
Yeah, and if you want to do something that isn't so much about an audience or consumers, that's also okay, but that might limit that will influence the kind of organisation that you want to have, and what the resources might be available for something like that, if it's effectively only for you, or you want 3-day festival, this people showing up. That's a whole other thing. I also wanted to sort of plant the seed, and I'm not sure which way it will grow, but I am based in Trentham, which is not as touristy and weekendy as Surf Coast, for example, but there is a population of people coming into the town and leaving the town at weekends, and working out how to bring some of those people into a community and resource some of the existing things, I think can be a delicate balance, that there can be a bit of resentment. I mean, I know it's like, oh, I can't park outside the post office on Fridays because too many people in town, I have to wait in the bakery or whatever. But that sense of being able to meet up with people and bring them in and their energy and potentially their resources, often the two home families, they might be starting to think about the kinds of giving back that they want to do in their other community and so on, and that it, as I said, it can really disturb the balance of an organisation, but it's also potentially worth considering how, once you figure out what kind of resourcing you need, whether there are people that you might not otherwise think of that would be quite keen to get involved, and that might be an established artist who has a holiday house in the area, or an architect, or somebody that just goes, oh, I love it. This is one of the reasons I come here, is that this community is really creative. How can I get involved and give back?
Yeah, definitely. And not non-permanent people who, otherwise may not be considered traditionally as,
they're not locals.
Yeah. But like an untapped resource, definitely.
Yeah, Trentham is the home of Spudfest, which is, it always pours with rain and it's freezing, and people walk around eating fried potatoes and baked potatoes and throwing potatoes, lots of potatoes.
Lots of potatoes.
Yeah, but they've just moved to 2 days after being a one-day festival now for 15 or 20 years, based on just that slight little bit of energy from people who have either relocated during COVID or whatever. Yeah.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I'm not sure if anyone has any questions that they want to put into the chat. Unfortunately, no one's able to actually speak in this webinar format, but if you have any questions, please pop them into the chat, and Jo and I will try to answer them as best we can. I'm just looking back through my list of what we may not have covered. I think we did talk a little bit about, this came up when I was reviewing the video of the governance thing the other day, the importance of being flexible, like that you don't need to have a strategy that's set in stone, that, you know, it is a great framework from which to work, and it's I guess a great stepping off point, but at the same time it needs to move and, you know, grow with you as the circumstances change. So on that, like, when is the time to, like, actively go, okay, like, does it become obvious, like, when you should go, this isn't working? Like, what are the telltale signs that, you know, what you're doing is not working?
I think ideally the discussion happens before you realise it's not working, and that you know, most committees have an annual cycle of meetings, and it's good to just dedicate one meeting in that cycle to a check-in, just to go, oh, is this still the right purpose? Is this still what we want to do? Do we want to adjust it in response to changing demographics, changing interest of the volunteers we're relying on, difficulty recruiting people, other organisations moving into our patch, all of those sorts of things. So just a little, you know, quite structured conversation about the ongoing relevance is quite good, so that you don't kind of get a hit the wall moment, which is potentially when there are frustrated people who feel like they're doing too much of the workload, or you know, not, or feeling like there's a lot of competition or something.
Wendy asked, interested to hear what you can offer as an art organisation to support a sponsor. And I was kind of thinking that goes back to, you really need to establish what you are doing now, and then I guess that makes it a lot easier for you to pull out the value of what that is.
Yeah.
Before you even go to approach a supporter or sponsor.
Yeah, and I think that understanding the difference between charity, philanthropy, and sponsorship is really important. That you know, charity is, you know, putting some money in someone who's got that hat out and needs a hand. You can just give them money and they do whatever they want with it. Philanthropy is probably a bit about someone's intent to change the world. So again, going back to that school performance example, you're probably looking for a philanthropist who believes in arts and education. And then a sponsor, that's actually a marketing transaction, you know, that they're wanting to activate your activity or your event in order to reach a market or reach an audience that they can't reach any other way. And so ideally, and then you get this, I suppose, a bit of an offshoot of sponsorship, which is that sort of corporate social responsibility, which kind of works a bit more like philanthropy. So, you know, in my neighbourhood, the Bendigo Bank, the local real estate agent, the local IGA have all got their names on the footy oval because they make donations, and I guess that's sponsorship. And they're getting that kind of feel good vibe in the community because they're being seen to support the local footy club. It's a kind of a mixture of them supporting the fact that there's a football club at all, but also getting a marketing push out of it. So in terms of what you can offer, I think just analysing what you have and what you want to do, and quite often what you want to do will come from government or philanthropic sources, because you can match your values. So I use Bendigo Bank because I think they're really great. They work really well in some of the small communities, and that they may very well have a purpose, or the FRRR, which is the Foundation for Regional Renewal, which is their purpose is making sure that regional communities recover from bushfires and so on. So if you've got an event like an exhibition that responds to a disaster, you might very well go to the FRRR, because your interests will align on a values-based level. But if you're looking to build the world's biggest Ferris wheel on the foreshore at Torquay, you might go to Channel 7, because that's a sponsorship opportunity. That's a gigantic advertising opportunity for them, and you might be able to say, well, that's worth however many hundreds of thousands of dollars, because of the amount of people that will go and look at Channel 7 because they've seen the Channel 7 logo on the Ferris wheel.
Yeah. And I guess too, looking at what other support other than monetary as well that you might need. So, and approaching like other people in that way, like there may be other levels of, or other resources that can be provided by other businesses or partners, or people with certain specific types of knowledge. So I guess part of the process of reviewing what you're doing and where the gaps are in how you're able to deliver what you're doing will help you realise both who you need to go to and who might exist within your community who might be able to help you first, and then going to them with a proposition of how, or what you need and why. So
and a question around what you can offer it can be, hey, we've got a very engaged group of people who are going to interact with your product, or it can be, we've got people whose lives will be improved by virtue of your involvement. And then in terms of sort of the cascading benefit, that logo recognition, doing workshops in a place of employment, all those sorts of things. New people can provide new directions, so we need to hand over responsibility responsibly. And I think Judith or Jane, one of the J's.
I think it's Judith, it's talking about
Judith. It may very well be kind of going back to that idea of job descriptions, or articulating what it is that you do so well and so responsibly, so that you're handing over to people who are walking into it really knowing what the responsibility is. And I suppose the word of caution, which I actually had at a chambermaid board meeting recently, because the artistic director wanted to change the structure of their job, and they said, well, I wouldn't want this to be forever, only while I'm being in the job. And the answer to that is you can't legislate, or you can't control the future. So in terms of providing really great documentation and engaging the people that you want to engage, and feeling like you've handed the organisation over in its best shape, it sometimes can be a bit disappointing what other people do with it.
But you kind of need to let that go.
Which is, it just is really disappointing. I know one of our colleagues who worked on a festival a bit further down the coast from you was very disappointed at the shape of something she's handed over, and has come to terms with this. But I think she's come to terms with it now. But I think that sense of providing the tools for someone else to take the organisation to its next place is the best way to do that in a responsible way, and hopefully without too many skeletons in the closet in terms of, debt or.
Well, I guess sharing and like having a good rundown of like the vision that was, you know, that you have for the organisation right now, the potential that it has, I guess, what assets you have, as, you know, what you've established so far, and making those really clear, like, you know, oh, we've got a wonderful space, we've got a really great existing audience, you know, we've really had great responses to our workshops, and we seem to fit within this part of the community.
Yeah, and who
And this
our
is what,
relationships are with.
yeah, and like laying all that out, you know, when you're trying to engage new people, and then that gives them an idea of whether they want to be involved in the first place, and but can also, and you're also being very welcoming to new ideas as well, like, because I think that's important, is to actually be open to, you know, if you're saying I need more people on the committee, you need to be able to say, okay, yes, come on the committee, it's great, we really value what you're contributing, this is the basic framework we have, but we'd love to hear your ideas within that, you know. And, you know, so you don't, you know what you're in for already. Like, this is like really pie in the sky too, by the way, but like, you know, this, I guess that's where that strategy comes back to too. You can always go, well, this is what we're, you know, this is the overall aims of this organisation. Please come in and provide new ideas and new experiences.
Yeah, you'll feel welcome.
Yeah.
I had this great team at the Malthouse who ran the workshop, and they always joked that when they were trying to solve a construction problem, they'd all stand around and go, oh, is that how you're going to do it? And it is that kind of thing. You know, it's really hard bringing new people in, because you kind of like, is that how you're going to do it? And then quite often it's really interesting, but it is that kind of like, how do you, and it was gorgeous that they were really self-aware enough to go, oh, okay, that's what we're like, and they'd made a real joke of it, and they introduced people to it. Like, and I used to, you know, go and have morning tea with them sometimes, and very occasionally brought them a cake, and they go, "No, it's a bit dry." You know, so is that how you're cooking these days? And so it was just their culture, and it was kind of lovely. But it was a really good thing to kind of be aware of, that workplaces can, or any kind of organisational culture can be a bit foamy.
Yeah.
But I think, Judith, the question's really good about that sort of handover and handing over of the culture, and something that you've worked on really hard, and that you want to look after and make sure that it continues to thrive.
That's right, because you invest so much time and effort into these things, and of course you do want to see them go well beyond you leaving. Like, there'd be nothing more devastating. I think it'd be even more devastating if you left and then it collapsed like a year later because the people weren't, you know, as opposed to it going in a different direction that maybe you didn't foresee. It's still going and they're successful. But I think it'd be much worse if it just fell over after 12 months and, you know, after you've put so much time and effort into it. So, yeah. So thanks, Judith. That was really good.
Welcome.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of this, like a lot of what good governance is.
At least the strategy part.
Yeah. I found some people struggle with the emotional handover and their legacy. This can show up as holding on to information.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
And that's in that's in a paid workplace as well as volunteer workplace, and that sense of needing to get everything perfect before they feel comfortable handing it over. It's kind of like you have to just like get it out of their hands and just say, let us, you know, something will go wrong, and you won't be blamed if that's what you're worrying about. But yeah, that's you know, all about human relationships, right? And the difficult conversations come with doing things with other people. If you want to have no complicated relationships, then be a sole practitioner.
Yeah. And I guess, well, yes. And I guess too, maybe a way of counteracting that is to actually go back to them and saying, well, you know, this is how we are going ahead with things now. And if they really hate that idea and have something to hand over, then they'll probably hand it over pretty quickly. But, you know, yeah, I guess, yeah, like you were saying, it is, it's, you know, people. Yeah. All right, well, we're getting up to 5 to 4, so that's like an hour. We've filled that really well. So I hope everyone got a lot out of that. next week we will be talking more about, I guess, the models and structures of governance, probably more the, I guess, so after you've thought about what you want to do, who you've got, the resources you have, then maybe looking at, what model will fit best in that situation. And I guess the benefits of each of those in each of those situations, like what model works in which situation best. And I guess talking about, as we did review, I guess we brushed slightly on Sunday as I was looking at the recording, was that talking about sole trader and also talking about for-profit and not-for-profit and how they're set up and ways of, I guess, not having workarounds to the system, but other ways of working so that you still ensure you're getting consistent funding or I guess support, but that your governance model is working for how you want to operate. So it's not impinging on your ability to get to access the funds that you need or want, but it's also ensuring that you're actually running well as an organisation. So yeah, so that's what we'll be doing next week. And then for the couple of weeks after that, we've got a couple of special guests. We'll have Mark Avery joining us on the third Thursday of the month. He's from the umbrella type structured organisation that we brushed upon in the South Gippsland area called Fabello. So Mark's going to come and talk with us about their beginnings, what they wanted to do, how they built their vision and how they're operating now. It's quite an interesting model and, of course, has positives and negatives. But I think it'll be a really interesting chat with him. So that's the third Thursday. So you can access the Teams links through our social pages for future weeks. Yeah. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Jo. That was a wonderful conversation.
Great. Thanks for the questions.
Yeah, thank you, everyone, for your engagement. It's
nice to elevate out of my own day-to-day.
Yes. Yeah, it was nice.
Excellent. Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Okay. See you later.